Welcome to More Than Words, a podcast about treating the whole child brought to you by the Reading and Language Learning Center. I'm your host, Tristan, and today I'm joined by licensed school psychologist and co-owner of Counseling and Assessment Practice of Fairfax, CAP Fairfax, Megan Davis, to discuss psychoeducational evaluations. Hi, Megan, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Tristan.
Yeah, we're excited for you to be here. This will be a great topic to kind of demystify for parents. So thanks for being here. So let's start with an introduction. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I am, again, Megan Davis. I've been a school psychologist for about 20 years now, which is hard to believe. And about 15 of those years, I was working in public schools as a school psychologist. And at some point, I transitioned and overlapped a little bit and started working in private practice doing evaluations. But the time I spent in the schools was invaluable. It really taught me
Yeah.
how IEP teams work, how easily some students can get underserved in a really complex system, even despite like everyone's best of intentions.
Right.
So like I said, I eventually moved into private practice because I really wanted to be able to offer families a more one-on-one or like tailored support. So now I am one of the co-owners of Cap Fairfax. So I spend my time doing these deep dive evaluations and helping parents to navigate these systems. I also, separately from that, supervise students at George Mason University, which is a big passion of mine, being able to
Yeah.
train the next generation of school psychologists. And it really keeps me on my toes with staying current and looking at things from both the clinical and the educational side.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I'm sure the students at George Mason are like very appreciative of your insights, having been in the school and also being in private practice. Like, I can't imagine how invaluable that is to them.
Yeah, yeah, it does seem
Yeah.
to be a good balance.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you're a co-owner at Cap Fairfax. So if people were looking for you guys, where could they find you, maybe physically and then also online?
Yeah, so our practice is located in like the heart of Fairfax City, and we actually just this past week or month moved into a new office space that we just love. We've been able to make it our own, and it's just really homey and cozy, and we love it, and we hope that our
Yeah.
clients find comfort in there as well. Um,
Awesome.
and then online, you can find us on our website, capfairfax.com. And we do post some on Instagram and Facebook at the handle Cap Fairfax. So you can look for us there as well.
Perfect. Well, I will put your website and social media in the show notes so that people can find you guys.
Great.
Awesome. Well, let's hop into this discussion. And I think a great starting point is if you could ground us with what exactly is a psychoeducational evaluation and what are like the questions that these types of evals are going to answer? Like, what are they designed to answer about a child's learning and development?
Yeah. So at its core, evaluations are really about solving a puzzle, which is the part I love about it the most. It's really easy for a kid to kind of get misunderstood or identified or labeled as, lazy or not really trying when they're really just dealing with something challenging in the system, or the environment is not a good match. So things like dyslexia or ADHD or autism or other learning or behavioral challenges. We're looking at how their brain works the best we can do with the tests that we have, their
Right.
academic skills, and their kind of emotional world to see how it all connects together. So that by the time we're done, the goal is to move away from the mystery or the big questions of like, why is this so hard, whatever the this is, and
Yeah.
to get a real understanding of how the child processes the world. And it's really the bridge between knowing something's wrong and then having a plan to help them thrive.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that you said it's kind of like solving a puzzle. I think sometimes evaluations, psychoeducational or otherwise, can be viewed as like really big, hard tests when they're not, that's not what their goal is. Their goal is to help you, build a pathway forward and kind of like uncover the mystery of what is making things so hard. So I appreciate the puzzle analogy.
Mhm.
So what are the main components of the psychoeducational evaluation and how are they supposed to kind of like piece together to create that full picture of a child?
Yeah, so I like to tell parents that or really think about how if you're really just looking at one piece of a child's life, or one area of their functioning, you might really misinterpret what's going on. So that's really why we look at several different areas. So each assessment is really going to be varied and be personalized for the child, for the student, based on those specific areas of concern. But we do like to take a broad look and then dig deeper in those areas where there are challenges and also highlight the strengths. So first, we tend to look at their cognitive skills, how they process information, and we use IQ tests and other related processing tests that help us to see how they handle information, how do they solve problems when reading, writing, or math is not needed, kind of separate from that, what their thinking and reasoning and problem solving skills are. And then we look at academics, the output. So we're going to check the specifics of their reading, their writing, their math, some aspects of oral language. And we're comparing it against other kids in like a normative sample. We're trying to see if is there a breakdown in one aspect, like for instance, with reading, we're trying to see is there if reading is a challenge, what part of reading is the challenge? Is it the
Mm.
sounding out of the words? Is it reading efficiently or having to take so much effort to read the passages that they're no longer able to comprehend? Um, or with math, is it about the calculation or is it more about kind of the broad understanding? Or with writing, is it the spelling? Is it the mechanics? Is it the physical act of writing? And so we're really doing a variety of tests that help to tease that out. And then we almost always look at some aspects of executive functioning or, go more in depth on that. So the executive functioning is like the manager of their brain. A kid can have really great underlying cognitive and achievement skills, but if the manager can't organize the work or stay on task or remember what's going on, then nothing's really going to get finished or there will
Right.
be a kind of a performance gap.
Mm.
And then we also look at their social and emotional functioning. We want to see what's going on in their internal world. Are they anxious? Are they frustrating? And how are they navigating their social life? When we put all of these pieces together and compare them to what's more typical for their age, and of course, there's a wide range at different ages, but we will have a much better understanding. We can stop seeing this as a problem and start seeing the student as a unique set of strengths and some really specific hurdles that we can come up with a plan about. We can classify these with a specific diagnosis, which isn't really meant to put them in a box, but really to, bring clarity. And the diagnoses can help link to the appropriate supports or services in different environments like school or with the doctor or other tutoring, whatnot.
Yeah. That is a great view of a psychoeducational evaluation. Like I said, I think it sounds like a big, large, scary test, but this helps us, I feel like, all see what actually goes into it and how it is just giving you like data, not to make us sound like we're robots, but it's
Hmm.
giving you like the data points of like these are the things you're super, super good at. These are the things that you're like you said, like these are the hurdles that you have. And like contextualizing that, and you really showed us how this is such a whole child picture and a whole child approach, which is like our goal here on the podcast,
Yeah.
right? But it's very cool because you don't realize when you hear a diagnosis, you do feel like it's a label, and you don't realize how much digging goes into like finding that label and how much the label doesn't necessarily matter. It's really the data points of the evaluation
Hmm.
that are like helping you understand what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't take diagnosis lightly. If you're saying that there's something outside of what is, a wide range of just being a normal human, we want to be sure that that is appropriate and that we're not, that we're taking this seriously, but also classifying things as, as they are to help access and open doors.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you for that. So from the parent's perspective, what should they, and then of course also their child, realistically expect during the evaluation process? So from once they get like that intake paperwork all the way through to when they get the feedback after testing.
Yeah, and you're right to say paperwork. There's definitely some plenty for parents, but that's all about this information gathering. So, the one thing to know is that we're really not just, quote, testing. we're investigating, we're gathering information from a lot of sources. And assessment does not equal testing. Assessment is much broader than the word testing. Um, and so we are doing assessments. And
Right.
so the first part, like you mentioned, is starting with the parents or the guardians. And so we're going through in addition to the paperwork, we're going through a thorough interview to talk about your child's history, their strengths, what you've been worried about, their development, and medical factors, social factors, academic trajectory, what supports they've had. We're really getting a clear story of your child to this point.
Right.
We will also reach out to teachers and have parents and teachers fill out different questionnaires to see how the child functions in the real world. Obviously, accessing teachers is just with, parent permission.
Sure.
We then comes the testing at that point. So we already have so much information before we've even met the child.
Right.
So with the child or the, teenager, we would schedule 2 or 3 sessions, usually about 2 or 3 hours each. So this sounds like a long time to be like taking tests, especially for a young child, but it's really doing a variety of different activities. And some places do all of this testing in one day, and it kind of mimics a school day. There's benefits to that, but we find breaking it up it's just kind of better for everybody involved, and it helps us to get an assessment of their true potential.
Right.
So we tell them that, we tell the child that, we're going to do a variety of activities, games, brain games, that to see how your brain works. Most kids are pretty curious about this, and they also enjoy the one-on-one attention, and they know something's not quite working. And if it's framed properly, this is, all part of helping them to thrive.
Right.
So they usually welcome it. And we take plenty of breaks for snacks and movement because we want to see them at their best, not like they're most tired or fatigued.
Right.
So then after the child leaves from those 2 or 3 sessions, that's when a lot of the work on our end really begins. So we're going to take all of that raw data, including the test scores, the teacher's comments, the parents' observations, how the child approached the tasks, and we weave them together to explain or have a more informed explanation of what's going on. And this will come together in a report. Then we're going to loop back again with the parents. And this is in what we call a feedback session. And so this is when we hand you this roadmap. We're just not going to give you a spreadsheet of scores, but we're going to explain exactly what these numbers mean for your child, like for what they mean for Tuesday morning in math class, for after school homework time, for Sunday afternoon at home, and really try to kind of link it to your everyday. And you'll get a copy of this report that you can share with school, with the pediatrician, with tutors, with therapists. And, we take a lot of pride in the fact that we write reports for people. We've gone to additional trainings and done a lot of reflection on how we want to share our information.
Right.
And I think the field is really growing in this, where we're not just writing for a file or for another psychologist. We try to
Right.
avoid the psychobabble or the jargon that only other psychologists understand. But
Mhm.
our goal is to hand the parent a document that a teacher, a pediatrician, or a tired, frustrated parent can read it and say, okay, we understand. Let's get to work now.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, sometimes the evaluation like reports can be like you said full of jargon,
Yeah.
and I can't imagine, like, I am not a parent, but I can't imagine as a parent to receive that, to be like, what am I supposed to glean from this?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Some
yeah.
of them can be like 40 pages. And, a lot of us were
Yeah.
trained in this more traditional model that
Hmm.
almost it looks like a journal article rather
Right.
than a document that can be used by anybody that picks it
Right.
up.
Well, it sounds like a great kind of like flow for the child and the parent. You've got like a good setup. And I like that you mentioned that the kids normally, as long as it's framed well, they're normally like, yeah, okay, great. Well, let's go
Mhm.
for it.
Yeah, it's pretty rare that they're really reluctant. And then, I mean, but that's information in of itself.
Right.
If they're really struggling with these activities, that tells us some information about how they handle things in the classroom or,
Right.
yeah, some observational data.
Yeah, very cool. Um, so I think a lot of parents have this moment of like, when do I know it is the right time to get my kid an evaluation, right? Sometimes people are told to wait, whatever, they're trying to figure that out. So what are some of the things, like some of the signs that you see or that you have parents see, where they realize an evaluation might be helpful, might be the next step?
Yeah. I mean, this is a big question because it really is an investment of time, of
Yeah,
energy, of money. The child usually has to be taken out of school at least a little bit. So, I mean, we're the first ones to say that not every child needs an evaluation. Sure, could you gain something from an evaluation? Yeah, almost certainly,
all right.
but not everybody needs it, just like you don't need certain medical procedures, even if maybe it could be helpful. It's that risk
Right.
management. So there's a few things that I like to look for and that I'm thinking about when I'm talking to parents and helping to make that decision. So first I kind of look at the like effort versus output gap. Like if your child is spending 3 hours on an assignment that should take 30 minutes, that's a big sign. Like we want to know we want that if the work coming out doesn't match like what you know of the child, we need to figure out why there that is that disconnect.
Right.
Now, of course, every child is going to have strengths, things that come easy and things that are harder or more challenging. But if there's significant underachievement in one or more areas, or the amount of effort to produce grade level work, if we're talking about educational performance, that is a sign.
Yeah.
Um, if they're having trouble interacting with doing activities that would be typical for their age group, whether that's socially or behaviorally or emotionally or academically in any of those areas, then that's something that might need a closer look. Then second, we kind of look at like what was the first line of defense or other lines of defense, like where we do encourage interventions first. And so for some diagnoses like learning disabilities, that is a requirement that there's been some targeted support related to the area of concern. So if you've done the tutoring, the school's done some interventions, you've done the maybe the behavioral sticker chart, and really the needle isn't moving much, it might be time to consider an evaluation. And schools now, when we're thinking about learning disabilities, schools are collecting a lot of progress monitoring data now. A lot of public schools are, testing 3 times a year. These are not diagnostic in and of themselves, but they do give some information about like forward movement and
Yeah.
progress. And if you're hitting a wall, like that's another cue. And then finally, like we can't ignore genetics. If there's a history of dyslexia or ADHD or autism or anxiety disorders in the family, and you're seeing some of those same traits in your child, getting an evaluation when you start to see some of those challenges or just some of those differences, that might be, proactive. Some people in previous generations, you know, will claim, I turned out just fine. We didn't have any of these labels, without being diagnosed.
Uh-huh.
But really, sometimes there's a lot of struggle there.
Yeah.
And this is really about giving your kid the tools they need before their self-esteem takes a hit. Yeah, so we know that's a hard decision, hard to figure that all out. And
Yeah.
so our practice and most other practices that I know of do offer kind of some 15, 20-minute free phone consultations. And so we can help you talk it through. And, if you end up calling our practice, you'd be speaking to me. Some practices, it's a well-trained secretary. In our
Right.
case, it's a psychologist that you'd be talking to help, just to help flesh it out. Because we
Yeah.
don't want to dive into this unless the child needs it and
Yeah,
it's the right time.
absolutely. Yeah. And kind of to go back to what you said before, right? Like most of the time you've got those kids in there that they they feel like they're having a hard time and so they know why they're present, right? And it makes sense. Like
Hmm.
the cause and effect is there. Whereas if, like you said, if there's a kid that maybe doesn't need full testing, they might be frustrated that they're present or like they might be confused as to why they're there, if they don't feel like they have such a hard time doing things. So
Yeah. Yeah.
great, great
And
point.
sometimes some kids are, don't have the self-awareness to really know that there is a challenge. But if several people in their child's life and there's some data to say, and you've tried some
Yeah,
things, that's usually a time to consider. Or you think they need more, you think they need something
yeah,
else, whether that's accommodations or services or
right.
just overall clarity.
Yeah, absolutely. So how is it that these evaluations, so psychoeducational evaluations, differ from like the school-based evaluations that you kind of mentioned,
Hmm.
um, in like their purpose. I think you mentioned diagnostics and like all the scopes and the outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I really do like this question because it's not one about one being better than the other. It's about different
Right.
lenses. And pretty much everything I kind of talked about leaned more toward, private practice style evaluations, but there's also a lot of overlap with school evaluations. And at the core, I'm a school psychologist at heart. And so I usually tell parents start with the school. See what they can offer first or what might make sense at school. So the difference is public schools are governed by a federal law called IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act. So their main job is to ask, does a child have a disability that requires an IEP, specialized instruction, special ed, to learn and function at school? So there's certain 13 different categories, eligibility categories that they look at. And if a child's struggle doesn't significantly impact their school functioning, the school might not be able to evaluate or provide services. And, you
Mm,
know, there's some gray area in there.
sure.
And it does take kind of some thorough discussion and review of data to help make that decision. But also keep in mind, when we're talking about special education, it's very different than it was when many of us were kids. There's just
Yeah.
a broad spectrum of services, a broad range of students that receive these services. So, the work in private practice with us or other groups is broader than special education
Hmm.
evaluations. We aren't limited by those specific 13 categories. We can reference them, but it's not our role to identify them. But we can diagnose through the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, like kind of the diagnostic book for our field. And so we can diagnose things like ADHD or autism or specific learning disabilities or anxiety disorders. So even if a child is like kind of getting by with B's or C's or generally doing okay at school, there still might be a diagnosis there that doesn't necessarily warrant school services or specialized
Mm,
instruction. So while a report or evaluation may include some of the same tests, like their focus is on the classroom and like school functioning, and our evaluations just are broader and kind of look at the child's whole life, their home functioning, their what they might need in terms of different therapies outside of school, how they do in the community. And some private evaluators do what's called an independent educational evaluation, which is another kind of way that bridges that gap.
right.
And these are like neutral second opinion evaluations that if a parent and a school don't really see eye to eye, the parents have the option of exploring that. Our practice does those, and some others,
Yeah, we offer
they
them
often
too.
provide a list. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, ultimately, the school is looking for what a students need to access their education,
Hmm.
and we're really looking at what does the child need to, like thrive, in life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's a good distinction too. I like that you explained how they're not one is better than the other. It is, you have to choose which one is appropriate
yeah, there are
for
different
like your kid.
scopes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's very
Yeah,
cool.
and it can be, and some evaluations in the private setting can complement or supplement what the school has done to kind of have that broader look. But it's not the the school evaluations. I mean, I do hear parents saying sometimes like the school won't test, but like they do have this really narrow um, reason. And
Yeah.
sure, everybody could benefit from additional information, but is there suspicion that there's a disability that requires specialized instruction? That's a pretty narrow scope.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. So once families have like the results from testing from a psychoeducational evaluation, um, how can they use that to advocate for their child across, all different settings? So like school, therapy, or even at home, like with other
Hmm.
kids in the house and family members.
Yeah. We like to see the final report as kind of like a user manual for your
Oh yeah.
child's brain, like at that
Right.
time. And advocacy and like helping is really like about using this data and data meaning tests and all the broad look to open the right outdoors. So in the school setting, it moves the conversation from, I think my child is struggling to this data shows that my child needs this.
Right.
It allows you to ask for specific tools or to open that conversation, like
Yeah.
specialized reading instruction or teacher check-ins that are really backed by evidence rather than a wish list.
Mm.
Um, it's also a big shortcut for outside therapists, whether that's in speech or occupational therapy or social therapy, or for other tutors. It helps them skip the guesswork and get right to, working with your child and building those skills on day one.
Yeah.
At home, this understanding can really change the narrative. You stop seeing like a difficult child who's giving you a hard time to a child who's having a hard time,
Mm.
and you start seeing a brain-based need. It helps you adjust your parenting to fit how they actually process information. But our goal is not to load up the child with as many supports as possible. It's about finding what's the minimum that they need to thrive or to achieve. For some, there's a lot of services that are needed. And for others, it's really just kind of some tweaks and some mindset shifts or some expectation changes or some subtle adjustments to their education or their environment. But because kids are always growing, of course, their needs are always going to change. So, the evaluation can just be a first step in helping them, find their own voice eventually so that they can advocate for themselves. Because really,
Right.
that's what we want is for them to be like, this is what I need,
Yeah.
and to, problem solve for themselves.
Yeah. Oh, this is so great. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the idea, like changing the mindset of what an evaluation is and how it functions. Because I do think, like I said before, I think it sounds so scary, but once you realize that it is kind of like you said, like a user manual, it almost makes me like want to have an evaluation of
Yeah.
my own brain and how it functions. So I can be like, listen, folks, here we
Right.
go. This is how I operate.
Hmm.
And so I love that idea of framing, I guess I should say, of an evaluation.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
everybody has things that come easy to them and that are harder for them. Like I always say,
Right.
I'm somebody that can get lost in my own neighborhood. Um,
Yeah.
just having spatial kind of challenges, but uh, but having a weakness doesn't mean it's a disorder. And
Right.
so we have to that's why looking at the whole picture and not just how you perform on a test or one
Hmm.
area of your life, is why it's like so important and
Yeah.
just really interesting and fun for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are like the things that you hear, like the myths and all of the fears that, parents have about value evaluations or like concerns about labels, privacy, waiting things out, all that kind of stuff?
Hmm. Um, one of the biggest hurdles is parents fearing like a label. But the truth really is that the diagnosis or the identification of the challenge doesn't create the struggle. The struggle is already there, and they may
Fair
be
point.
already identified in some way by their classmates, by their teachers, by their peers.
Right.
Um, Naming it can take away the shame and help build that understanding. It can replace words like lazy or unmotivated or even weird with
Mm,
like the understanding that the child needs just a different set of tools or a different way of being understood. And so it can
right.
change just like the whole vibe from being like, what's wrong with you to like, how does your brain work? Or here's how my brain works.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like I said, not every child needs a formal evaluation, but on the other side, just waiting without any support is really often just waiting to fail. And
Mm,
so we really don't want to wait until a child's self-esteem or their other areas of functioning is broken or really suffering to start looking for answers. Early knowledge can be, I don't know, a gift. It can protect their sense of self, their family's sense of who they are, and just gives families like a proactive path forward. And regarding the privacy question, in private practice, like privacy is, well, in all of settings, really, privacy is paramount and it's
right.
legally required
Yeah.
through HIPAA and then, through FERPA in the schools. So all the clinicians get plenty of training and all of the we are bound by those laws. And in private practice, you own the data. Like this is where you don't share anything without your express written permission and your
Right.
choice to do what you want with this information. You can just get it and share it with nobody, or you could share it broadly to everybody that, interacts with your child.
Yeah.
Um, so you're really in the driver's seat there. If we do collaborate with your child's school or it's a kind of a more school-based evaluation, you know, there's, laws governing that if it's a school-based evaluation, and then there is you'll know ahead of time, you get informed consent on that piece. And
Yeah.
so if it's something like an IEE, that individualized independent educational evaluation, we'll decide together, what gets shared, but like that really is kind of owned by the district. And we just really value what the role that the parent plays in like being an expert in their child, and we're just here to kind of support and bring some, expertise into thinking about things a slightly different way so we can really understand and, help kids do well. And kids can do well if they can. Kids do well if they can. So
Yeah.
that's Ross Green. So it's we help to understand if they're not doing well, why, what's getting in the way.
Yeah. Oh, well, this has been fantastic. I really, like I said, I really appreciate um everything you've said about psychoeducational evaluations. I didn't have a fear about it because I wasn't getting my kid tested for it, or getting an evaluation for my kid,
Mhm.
but it did kind of help me as a person without a child understand the process more and um take the fear out of it, even if I didn't have fear. Like it made it
Mhm.
sound
Yeah.
so simple and so supportive as opposed to scary and like label filled, if you will.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been living and breathing these kind of evaluations for a long time now and honing my skills and collaborating with others who are doing similar work. And
Yeah.
I feel like the field is really growing and this neurodiversity movement
Mhm.
is really empowering.
Yeah.
And it helps in trying to figure out how do we bridge, of course, accepting people for who they are with also connecting them to the resources that they may need.
Yeah.
And, we hope to be able to do that the best we
Yeah.
can.
Absolutely. Well, anything else you want to add before we wrap here?
So if you are in the Northern Virginia area or really anywhere in Virginia and considering that your child might need an evaluation, we'd be happy to collaborate and have one of those free consultations. Just all you have to do is just check out on our website or give us a call and we'll schedule a time just to chat about what's going on with your child and figure out if we're the right fit for you or if we have any other suggestions. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, again, all of your stuff will be in the show notes so folks can find you that way. And just thank you so much for being here, Megan.
Yeah, thank you, Tristan.
Yeah. Thank you so much to the audience for listening. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a little rating and review. It helps other folks find the podcast, and we'll chat with you next time.